I really started to treat females with PMDD or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, women with PCOS, women with endometriosis. Some of these women, experience suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, almost psychosis-like levels of disturbance. It's so heartbreaking. One of the things that we focused on is progesterone. Progesterone is truly, in many ways, the antithesis to estrogen when it's too high. It tells your central nervous system to relax. It helps women and men feel calm. Again, progesterone stands out because it is one of the antidotes to today's problems, and especially for women. Hey guys, welcome back to the Nico Misleh Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. This is an episode that I was highly requested to record. I asked you guys, hey, I've been doing a lot of business stuff on this podcast. Do you want some more clinical stuff? And it was a resounding yes, please, Nico, more clinical stuff. So let's talk a little bit more clinical stuff. I am going to talk about progesterone today. For those of you who don't know, I was recently on one of my friends and colleagues and actually HRTU students' podcast. His name is Mason Collins. Live Oak Testosterone, I think is his clinic name. Mason, I'm so sorry if I'm missing that. Anyways, great guy, excellent podcast. But he asked me a question on there that I loved. He asked me, Nico, if you had to pick your favorite hormone, which one would it be? And that is a freaking tough one. Progesterone is probably my favorite if I had to pick one. I don't know why. I really love it. Well, no, that's not true. I do know why I like it so much. I call him one of my mentors, and I'm not trying to say that we actually spent any real time together, but I feel like we did. His name was Dr. Ray Peat. He's a relatively obscure PhD biologist from Oregon. And he passed away, almost 2 or 3 years ago now. An absolute legend of a human being. God rest his soul. Dr. Ray Peat was a very fringe type of character. He really kind of cut his chops back in the 1960s and 70s, teaching biology and in many instances kind of along the lines of even health and wellness in local universities. He had at one point even started his own college. He lectured frequently at naturopathic universities, if that gives you a sense of how this guy was back in the 1960s. So he was out there. He had very interesting ideas, but he was talking about things back in the 1960s and 70s. And, up until present day, essentially, he was talking and predicting about things in our modern world that were just so unbelievably, at that time, far out that he sounded a little bit like a quack. But if you really understood what he was saying at that point in time, he was really predicting what's going on today. He immediately saw the dangers and repercussions in the 90s, in the early 90s, maybe even the early 80s, as far as these serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. He was calling the shots on antidepressants way back when. He was calling the shots in terms of hormones. He saw the degradation of my favorite hormone, and I would argue it was his favorite hormone because he practically wrote his thesis on it, progesterone. He was a progesterone and thyroid guy. This guy knew hormones better than anybody I've ever listened to in my life. I mean, if you have the opportunity to listen to some of his lectures, be prepared. They're very, very deep and very sciencey. But he's been on, podcasts up into his recent passings. He's got some stuff on YouTube. Again, kind of an obscure character and very fringe, but he was just such a legend. And my heart goes out to him and his family, because of the contributions that he made to our world. I wish they were more well-known. And honestly, the HRT University course in many ways, in many areas of that, it's an homage to his integrity and his intellect and what he was able to teach through me as a kind of virtual mentor, so to speak. And anyway, so I hope those of you listening, if you have the opportunity to ever listen to or read some of his stuff, he still has a website, I think it's literally raypeat.com. where he has articles. They're just super fascinating and really interesting. And he was one of those just incredibly open-minded characters. And he saw through a lot of the BS that modern medicine, modern pharmacology, and big pharma, whatever you want to call it, he saw through a lot of that stuff. And so anyways, he really turned me on to progesterone, especially, and this was, 7 years ago when I really started trying to attempt to treat females with PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, women with PCOS, women with endometriosis. From a conventional lens, I'm looking at these different diseases, and they're radically different from each other from a conventional point of view. They, have very interesting therapies. So, for example, PMDD, the gold standard is still, technically speaking, SSRIs, which, again, didn't make any sense to me. I'm thinking about this through a perspective of, okay, so this young lady or whatever, she's cycling regularly or irregularly, but no matter, when she does cycle, she experiences, especially during her, getting into the luteal phase, this rapid change in her mental health. And to me, I think, well, that screams hormones, right? I mean, isn't that what's creating that shift anyways? And if you think about PMDD, it seems a lot like PMS, but on steroids, right? It's like this, unbelievable, take PMS and just make it 1,000 times worse, to the point at which some of these women, experience like a level of, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, almost psychosis-like levels of disturbance, is so heartbreaking. And I kind of got confronted by these women who were suffering from this disease, because I was working in a functional medicine capacity, but in a mental health setting, so to speak. And these women were tired. They were tired of going to their primary care, to their psychiatrist, and just getting the same old workaround of well, yeah, it sounds like PMDD. Here's your antidepressant. If that doesn't help, some of these poor women, it got so far as to, again, if it's really, really bad, having a total hysterectomy. Just remove the ovaries, just stop the cycles entirely. If not that, from a chemical standpoint, they would be given, basically, I'm blanking on the words, medications that would disrupt completely, GnRH antagonists, right? They would totally disrupt the ability for that woman to have any amount of hormone production at all, right? I mean, they're chemical castrators. That's what they are. They're literally chemical castrators. And by the way, again, I'm not disparaging anybody who is on those or has been prescribed them, or if you have prescribed those to people, that's what the conventional world tells us to do. So I'm not blaming you guys at all. But it just seems so crazy to me. I just thought that seems like the last thing I would ever want to do to a poor female. Absolutely. I mean, I don't even know if that would ever come into the universe of this seems like an appropriate therapy. I mean, I couldn't imagine, what is essentially, neutering a human being without trying something else first, and something else that actually made sense logically. An SSRI, why am I giving an SSRI? Now, I'm not saying they can't improve some of the symptoms, okay? I'm not saying that. But there's a big difference between improving symptoms and getting to the root cause, and potentially also improving symptoms because you got to the root cause. And a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor doesn't make any sense if, in fact, PMDD is hormonally driven. And so I remember literally the first PMDD patient I ever had, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm not an OB-GYN, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a family med guy. I'm looking at mental health through a functional medicine lens, and my promise to patients was, hey, I'm not an expert in any of these things. I'm not your mental health expert. I'm not your OB-GYN or any of that, but what I am is a functional medicine guy, and what I can help you hopefully do is find some sort of adjunctive way to help you feel better by attempting to get to the root cause. And I remember that first PMDD patient. I didn't really know that much about PMDD. Seriously. I mean, I vaguely remember touching on it, in my F&P studies in grad school. And so it was a really interesting case. She was such a lovely person, lovely, absolutely lovely. We were about the same age at the time, so late 20s, mid to late 20s. And she was just having a heck of a time. She had just gotten married. She really wanted to have kids. That was primarily why she was being seen. She had no idea she had PMDD, like for, the longest time, right? She just always thought it was just this miserable cycle that she had, and she would have these depressive episodes and, crushing amounts of anxiety, especially. And it just kept getting worse. And when she saw me, it was so bad that she started having, it wasn't homicidal ideation, but she would get really irritated with her poor husband. And she loved this guy. She really loved this guy, and he loved her a lot. I would see them oftentimes together. In fact, the first consultation, they were both together. They were just the sweetest couple. And it was heartbreaking because he would tell you that's not her. That's not who she is. But there is this, almost week-long period of time, sometimes even longer, where I can't be around her. I'm scared to be around her. She's scared to be around me, kind of thing. And like, wow, can you imagine like your first, few months or year of marriage, like you're dealing with that. And of course you want to have kids, and, she's saying she can't because God forbid, like, what if she did something to that? I mean, it was just really heartbreaking. So I remember telling her, look, gal, I'm going to try my best. I don't know what I can promise you here, but this is going to be my new passion project for the next several months. And I'm going to try my best to figure this out. And so I did what I do best, which is, well, let me read. Let me just dig into the literature. For those of you who don't know, I freaking am a dork. I love reading. I love reading really boring stuff a lot of the times. So I dig into the literature, and what was startling right off the bat was actually how much literature was surrounding PMDD and hormonal fluctuations, and also these questions that researchers kept stating but never seeming to delve into, which was, this is hormonally driven. We just can't seem to figure out which hormone or why. And we tried progesterone in a couple studies and it didn't seem to work, so we kind of moved on. So I'm looking through these studies, and I'm trying to piece together exactly, what did you guys do? What did you give these women? What type of hormones? Oftentimes they're using like birth control, which I'm like, okay, that's not hormones. Real quick, let me go on a rant. Progestin and ethinyl estradiol or conjugated equine estrogen, those are not hormones. They're not. Like, we need to reclassify these things. When I say HRT, I'm not making an umbrella here. HRT is hormone replacement therapy, not hormone-like replacement therapy. Progestins, like medroxyprogesterone acetate, conjugated equine estrogen, they're not real hormones, guys. They're Franken-Hormones. They're not bioidentical. They're synthetic, but that's not the problem. So are bioidenticals. Bioidenticals are synthetic. The problem is that they do not look exactly like our hormones, nor do they act exactly the same as our hormones. I mean, progestins, frankly, they don't look anything like progesterone. If you ever look at a picture of them, wildly different results. So that doesn't count. So I'm looking through these studies. I'm like, okay, these don't count. These do count. There are just a very small handful of studies that actually looked at bioidentical progesterones. When I say progesterone, I mean P4, bioidentical progesterone. And those studies were very like, it doesn't seem to help that much. And I'm looking at the dosing and I'm thinking, okay, well, it didn't seem to help that much in all of the patients. It seemed to help in some of the patients. And I'm looking at some of these dosings and I'm like, okay, 100 milligrams of oral progesterone? What about 200 milligrams? Like, that's not a weird dose. Even in conventional settings, we'll see 200 milligrams tossed around every now and then. That's more common in my universe. And we teach that in HRT University. So I said, okay, what if we just start with bigger doses of progesterone? Because again, when I'm thinking about hormones, now this is the really helpful part. These are the principles of hormones. When we get down to the nitty gritty of what do each one of our hormones do? How do they act? How do they behave? When we think about estrogen, and I'm talking about estrogen as actually an umbrella here, okay? The estrogen that we produce as men and women, estrogen is, generally speaking, very stimulating. It's very exciting to the human body. It's proliferative. It's a very primordial. I mean, I really think of estrogen as a primordial hormone that allowed us as human beings to flourish in many ways, and mammals in general. Estrogen is what says, grow, baby, grow. It's what allows us to, shed a uterus and regrow it over and over and over again as females. It's what stimulates our brains. It's what drives a lot of our libido is tied up with estrogen, right? It's very wow, it's exciting and stimulatory. If you have too much estrogen, think of it like a cup of coffee. I love to make these comparisons. I actually make this comparison in the course, the master course. Estrogen is 1 cup of coffee, right? A little bit of estrogen, man, what a great day you're about to have. It warms you up. It's got a little bit of that caffeine. It kicks your cognitive system in gear, helps you feel awake and alert, maybe even a little bit antsy in a good way, helps you be productive, right? Now, if you're sensitive to caffeine, especially, or if you've ever had just way too much caffeine, let's say you drink 5 cups of coffee in an hour. That feeling where you're like, I don't know why, but I feel anxious and nervous, is because you had way too much coffee. And now it's it's not a positive return. It's now kind of a net negative return where now you really got to poop and you feel anxious. Okay. So, estrogen in many ways is kind of like that. If you have too much estrogen, which again, you'll hear phrases like estrogen dominance. Yeah, it's just too much estrogen. And what does that do? It makes you feel kind of crappy, excited, irritable, anxious, which will also produce quite irrational thoughts. It can drive, at that point, more inflammation, which is, again, a really interesting thing about estrogen. Estrogen in general, when it's balanced, so to speak, when it's in an optimal range in a healthy human being, it has very potent anti-inflammatory, antioxidative capacities, right? It actually helps us heal and rejuvenate and do all the wonderful things that we do as human beings. When it's out of control, it proliferates, it grows stuff, fibroids, tumors, God forbid it then creates cancers. Okay, so estrogen is not the devil incarnate. It's not. I know I'm going to make it sound that way, but it's really not. It's a wonderful hormone. I love estradiol and estrogen. It's amazing. But here's the real kicker. Why are we seeing more and more diagnoses of PMDD, PCOS, endometriosis? Why? Why all of a sudden is this such a big thing? Even 20 years ago, I don't remember growing up, or even as I got into nursing school, I do not remember PCOS and PMDD and endometriosis being even as significant as it is today, 10, 15 years ago, or 15 years later, rather. I don't remember it, and maybe I'm wrong, but even when I'm looking at the literature and when I'm talking to my peers and colleagues, it just seems more and more and more pervasive. And of course, look, don't get me wrong. I'm sure we're getting better at diagnosing these things and recognizing these things. But let's be honest, it's tremendously changed since, when you look back in the literature, it's practically unheard of in the 1960s. And by the way, my grandfather grew up then, and that guy was sharp as a tack. Those guys were not missing things. They really weren't. Ray Peat was talking about those things back then. So it existed. It just wasn't at the severity that it is today. And it is because our modern world is shifting so dramatically. I talk all the time about we live in this toxic soup, and there's lots of parabens and phthalates and these endocrine disruptors and everything on our clothes and in our furniture and in our shampoos and conditioners. They're in our foods, in our water. And they have massively disrupted the way we as human beings behave and develop. Men, what are we seeing? Low testosterone levels, high in relative relationship, higher like estrogen levels. What are we seeing with women? What happens if you take a woman's estrogen and you just skyrocket it to the moon? They're already making a lot of estrogen. That's what women do. When they're young, women make a ton of estrogen. They're supposed to be estrogen making machines. Now add on top of that, so you think about, okay, woman makes this much estrogen, every day or around these times of the cycle. Now double that, right? We have this cumulative effect because of the environmental factors, the endocrine disrupting xenoestrogens, which the body, more or less confuses as real estrogens. And so now our poor female patients have a relatively higher estrogen level. And by the way, this won't show up on blood work unless you're like testing for, xenoestrogen somehow. And it's not like we have some gold standard of measuring that with your estrogen. But what you need to know is that is what we see presenting to us. We see women with PMDD, OCD, anxiety, irritability, trouble sleeping, insomnia, right? They're having those horrible mental anguishing types of effects that really, really, really high estrogen levels cause, because our progesterone is also now relatively low and it's just getting squashed to death. Our thyroids are starting to become affected because these estrogens start affecting the way our liver processes things, right? Our liver's supposed to help detoxify a lot of this stuff, and it's becoming overwhelmed. And so it gets kind of sluggish. And our thyroid's supposed to be trying to help our liver function, but it can't because our progesterone's low, which our progesterone has a really nice relationship with thyroid and vice versa. And then what happens to our cycles if you're a female? Do you see where I'm getting with this? It's just one thing after another. And it creates this vicious cycle. That is where we're at today in our modern world. And that was it was really it was eye-opening because I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm the first person to figure this out. I totally wasn't, because when I was looking for answers, I found Dr. Ray Peat, who was just an absolute breath of fresh air for me, because I actually had someone who was way smarter than me who was talking about this a long time ago, and he had figured out the solutions, really elegant solutions, right? Not just like, well, let's just like nuke this lady with a bunch of, castrating chemicals so that she doesn't feel anything anymore. He was saying the problem is low progesterone and low thyroid. There are things that we can do from a dietary prescription, so to speak, that we can improve upon those things. Making sure you poop every day, at least once a day. Genius. Now we're not carrying a bunch of estrogens in our belly all the time that are just getting recirculated. We're lowering our endotoxin levels, those nasty byproducts of bacteria that are being caused because our gut's kind of slow, because our thyroid stinks. I mean, he just had all these amazing answers. But he was not shy about the use of hormone replacement therapy. He was the first person that I really felt like almost gave me permission to pursue hormone replacement therapy to the nth degree, because he didn't see hormone replacement therapy as fringe. He saw it as foundational. He saw it as something that truly moved the needle, and it was functional. It was root cause. He was the first person to show me that, hey man, that thyroid pill, MP thyroid or Armour thyroid that you give patients, the ancient Chinese medical practitioners have been using that for hundreds of years, thousands of years almost. This isn't new. The way in which we process these things might be different, but hormones are hormones. And why not use something so therapeutic and safe and benevolent for women and men who are suffering? And it really, I just remember the sigh of relief that I felt when I read his words and when I understood what he was saying and when I understood the problem and then the solution. We live in a very novel and modern world, and it's ever changing. However you feel about it, I feel that we are like, our technology is developing faster than we are as human beings. It's ahead of us, and we're doing things that we could have never foreseen doing, and it's having radical and very oftentimes detrimental effects on us and our health and wellness. And I know we're trying to change that around, which is awesome, but it doesn't negate the fact that it's here and present right now. And I hope that in my children's lifetime, or maybe their children's lifetime, they finally get around to fixing all these problems that we created. But at the very least right now, what can I do as Nico Misleh, as a provider for this young woman sitting across from me who is really suffering? And so I thought, okay, I think I know what's going on here. I think I have some solutions. So I won't belabor you with some of the diet and lifestyle changes that I had her do, but I'll try to kind of summarize it a little bit. Number one, we had to recognize what stress was in her life so that she could attempt to avoid it. So many of us are like, you need to lower your stress levels to our patients. What the heck does that mean? A lot of us don't recognize where stress is coming from. This is another thing that Ray Pete, Hans Selye, I always butcher his last name, wonderful scientist, again, from quite a while back. But he was kind of the godfather of stress hormones. They kind of presented stress in a very interesting way to me. I don't know how many of you recognize this, but let's just say you have many of us do, a 20 to 30 minute car commute, like inside your vehicle. And you're probably like, Nico, where the hell are you going with this? Hang tight. You are driving a vehicle at 30, 40, 60, 70 miles per hour on a road with other vehicles going the same speed, if not faster. And we're fortunate enough somehow as human beings to be able to respond and adapt to that level of speed. That alone is a stressor, okay? And I know that sounds so stupid, Nico, come on. Seriously, man, me driving my car, that's I don't feel that stressed. Just because you don't feel it doesn't mean your body's not experiencing it. Why do you feel totally wrecked after an 8-hour car ride to a vacation destination? I mean, all you're doing was sitting, eating some snacks, listening to some good music, maybe a podcast, hopefully mine. Why are you just destroyed when you get to your location? It's because your brain is going 1,000 miles a minute to keep up with your 60 mile per hour driving and other people's 60 mile per hour driving. Think about your phone, doom scrolling. Even just looking at Facebook, you come across several negative things. And, maybe on the interface, it's not that big of a deal, but your subconscious is processing those things. The words that were said or the images that were displayed. The blue light that we're exposed to, right? All of these things, we don't feel them as stressors. Just when I take vitamin D3, I don't feel better. I really don't. I've never taken vitamin D3 in my life ever and thought, wow, I feel so much better taking this. However, what I do know is that when my vitamin D3 levels are better, I tend not to get as sick as often, and I do actually tend to experience better health and wellness. And yet I don't feel it. Well, I don't feel all the stress either. And in our modern society today, we have more stress than we likely in many ways ever had in our entire lives. And it's different. Okay. So I'm not saying that when we were hunter-gatherers, that wasn't stressful. It was probably really stressful, probably really, really stressful. And yet in some ways it was very leisure. There was a moment in time where, honestly, if you had food and things were going okay, you just were laying around. Not us today. It is 24/7. The minute you get up, we got to take the kids to school, and then I got to get to work, and then my boss is upset, and then I watch something on Facebook, and it really, startled me, and now I'm thinking about that, and then I listened to a podcast, and that made me freaked out because AI is going to take over the world. I drank 5 cups of coffee, which was a really bad idea, right? It's so much more stressful in our modern lives than you think. So we really had to name her stressors. And I, of course, am not going to be able to get rid of all her stressors, but can I get rid of some of them? Or at least can I get her to recognize that some of these are stressors and you have to find ways around them? And let me help you find some novel solutions. In terms of diet and her exposure to chemicals, can we lower these? Guys, I don't think these are weird conversations to have with patients. They want to know this stuff. Okay, tell me what you're using for your shampoo and conditioner and your deodorant. Because my wife and I, we've gotten rid of 99% of the garbage that we used to use back in the day. And I can help you. I can help you find things that you can use and that are much safer probably. All right, what kind of makeup do you use? What kind of, do you use, certain detergents in your laundry? What kind of clothes do you wear? Do you have polyester sheets? Like maybe we could get rid of all these things that are constantly causing endocrine disruption. So we did that together. I mean, we just head to toed that for a while. This is an ongoing conversation, right? I'm not trying to overwhelm my patients with that stuff. Just over time, hey, can we improve upon these things? We did the same thing with her diet. Can we limit the amount of foods that irritate you, that irritate your gut? Again, whether you realize it or not. All she did was eat salads all day long. And I'm not disparaging salad eaters, okay? I'm not saying salads are bad. For her, in her particular situation, a lot of those really like raw veggies. So she was eating like a lot of raw broccoli and a lot of raw cauliflower mixed in with, lettuces and spinaches and stuff like that. Like, I'm not saying all these things are bad, but when they're raw, they can be really, really hard to digest. They can be very difficult on your GI system when it's very weak and fragile, especially when you don't have good hormones. And that alone can start causing more inflammation to occur within the GI system. It can increase things like endotoxins. Again, these are lipopolysaccharides, little teeny fragments of gram-negative bacteria, byproducts that basically just overwhelm your immune system. And when they get into your systemic system, when they leak out of your GI system and get into the systemic system, it's what ultimately causes even things like the beginnings of sepsis and whatnot. A lot of this endotoxin stuff is now getting linked to risk of cardiovascular disease, plaque buildup, myocardial infarctions. It's being linked to autoimmune diseases. Obviously, if you think about Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, almost always those two beget more autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, all these horrible things. So what about your mood and behavior? If they get into the systemic peripheral system, and then all of a sudden we get these, inflammatory byproducts aggravating the brain and the central nervous system, on top of the fact that we have really high estrogen levels, which are very stimulating. Well, how the heck are you going to feel when you're around your PMS, time of the month? Not good. Not good. It's going to push you over the edge. This is the needle on top of the haystack. So we did all that stuff, but in particular, one of the things that we focused on is progesterone. Progesterone is truly, in many ways, the antithesis to estrogen when it's too high. They're the yin and the yang, right? So if you think of estrogen as stimulating and excitatory and, 5 cups of coffee, progesterone is calming, relaxing. It literally is, it's GABAergic. It tells your central nervous system to relax. It helps activate your parasympathetic nervous system in many ways. It helps women and men feel calm. It helps us build up our resiliency to stress. It helps us feel more grounded. And I know that sounds a little hokey, but I mean that. Like from an esoteric standpoint, that's what progesterone does. It's a wonderful hormone. It is necessary for pregnancy. Why? Because it protects and nurtures the embryo, the fetus. It helps shift the immune system so that it doesn't attack the fetus, right? Progesterone helps feed and nurture the thyroid as a gland and as an organ, right? In so many ways. And it helps produce healthy amounts of T3 and T4, and it even helps those T3s and T4s convert. Progesterone is literally directly, much like estrogen is also, and testosterone, many others, but progesterone in a beautiful sense is pro-mitochondria, pro-energy. And remember, energy is it's the currency of life. So if we have enough energy, it means that we have the ability to create healthy structures, healthy cellular structures, which means healthy tissue structures, which means healthy organ structures, right? And the whole system can operate okay. Structure begets function, and energy is really the currency of all that. So I love progesterone for that reason. And again, progesterone stands out because it is one of the antidotes to today's problems, and especially for women, which is if we have too much estrogen, even xenoestrogen, we need more progesterone to counteract that, right? It's like a seesaw. If I give a woman oral progesterone at 200 milligrams, and maybe even a little bit as needed during that rough period of time when her PMDD spikes, what generally do we see? A huge improvement in those symptoms. Why? Because we're finally balancing that relationship between too much cumulative estrogen and not enough progesterone. If you add a little bit of thyroid in, you see even more magic happen because of thyroid and progesterone's very intimate and intricate relationship with each other. I treated this young woman with progesterone, and I did it in a way that I think at the time, I thought this makes more sense than what the researchers were attempting to do. We need more progesterone because we have too much estrogen. And we also need to maybe even consider how do we cycle that? We don't just want to give progesterone to all these women all the time necessarily. If they're younger and cycling, we still want the ebb and flow of estrogen and progesterone, guys. Women are supposed to have high estrogen portions of their cycles. Why? So that they feel strong and their libido's high and they want to make a baby with their husband, right? If you just give too much progesterone, it'll act like birth control. Too much progesterone for some women will cause them to stop ovulating completely. So give some respect to the power of even bioidentical progesterone. It's powerful, and it's not birth control, by the way, just to clarify. So don't get that wrong. But I remember the message that she sent me. It was probably because again, she was a really interesting patient because for the most part, most of her life outside of her quote unquote terrible moments of her period and cycle, she was fine. She was a totally normal lady doing her thing, working, being in a loving relationship. And we were just crossing our fingers, like holding our breath for when she entered into that kind of PMS portion of her cycle, when she's kind of flipping from follicular to luteal, when everything would just bounce off the walls. And I remember the message she sent me. And she said, Nico, I bawled my eyes out today because it was the first day that I woke up and I didn't want to kill my husband. And I'm laughing only because I knew she was kind of joking about that, but there was a little bit of seriousness with that. I immediately, I had to call her. I had to because I was a freaking nervous. I probably should have taken some progesterone the night before. I was a freaking nervous wreck. I've never done anything like that before for a female like that at that time in my life as a provider. And we were both just so relieved, and we were laughing and probably crying a little bit together. And it was just an overwhelmingly wonderful experience. And it was finally okay, I am bringing to light what my amazing predecessors like Ray Peat were talking about back in the 70s and 80s. And I finally feel like something has clicked. I feel like I understand something here, something really interesting. And I am going to spend the rest of my life attempting to get better and better at this so I can help more women like her. And I'm not going to lie, It's not always a 10 out of 10 thing. I still have ladies that is really tough. And there's a lot of other things that go alongside premenstrual dysphoric disorder or PMDD. So I'm also not sitting here saying there aren't some psychosocial things that probably get drummed up there. But for the vast majority of my female patients and for my other students who have seen these patients, their world radically changes. And they feel like they can be themselves again. This patient, I've seen her for, literally, it was almost 7 years now. And she's doing amazing. She's got, I think, 2 or 3 kids now. I don't see her that much, and it's great because she's just out there living her life. I do see her husband too, by the way. He was like, whatever you're giving her, give it to me. Like, how do I get better too? So, because he was suffering too. And, he like a wonderful, loving husband that he was spending so much time and energy on his wife and their relationship that he didn't realize how much he was suffering from hormonal insufficiencies. And so now they're both optimized, and now they're both living out that feeling of like, hey, we're self-actualized, and they're involved in their church, and they're involved with their work, and they do amazing things and fun things with their kids all the time. And it is just the best feeling ever. And I always want to, again, pay homage to these mentors and predecessors of mine who truly were shouting from the rooftops. They were like the canaries in the coal mine. And I just don't think we gave them enough credit. And if I can find ways to give these amazing men and women some credit, I will. And I hope I have in some capacity, and I hope I've made them proud. Just with HRT University, bringing some of these ideas to light. So this is one of the reasons why I love progesterone so much. And I think I just had that overwhelming experience. It was one of the, it's funny, I'd actually treated men with testosterone prior to that. And it was amazing, right? I mean, you see these groundbreaking changes and stuff, but it would be a little bit later after I saw this PMDD patient that I would start treating men with who were really coming in with some much stronger, PTSD types of effects and stuff, and treating them with testosterone was incredible too. So I'll tell you, I love all the hormones. Like I really, it's so hard for me to pick one, but progesterone has just such a unique capacity in today's world, especially because of all the novel things going on. And it's actually one of the hormones that I will occasionally also use for men. And I was told by many of my mentors to never, ever, ever give men progesterone. They don't need it. And I think that's silly because we do make it and we do need some of it, not a lot. And I talk about that in my course a lot. Like, how do we use that? When would that be an option that we'd want to dip into the bag and into our toolbox and kind of utilize? And again, it's more rare, but for men with like benign prostatic hyperplasia and things of that nature, progesterone can be super helpful. Really, really low dose can make a humongous difference for those male patients, and they feel great and they sleep really good too with it. And I've never had any negative reactions from that at all. There are a couple people out there that would tell you, progesterone for men, it causes crazy amounts of inflammation. I debunked that. I wrote a daily email about that a while ago. If you're ever interested in like reading that, I debunked it, but it's actually in the course when we go over progesterone. In fact, with COVID, believe it or not, all the things going on in the world, a group of scientists and providers said, hey, you know what, we should try using progesterone for men with COVID. Why? Because it has radically interesting effects on the immune system and is largely a very, 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 very potent anti-inflammatory and pro-metabolic hormone. And what did they find? Radically lower levels of inflammation. And these guys healed significantly quicker. They got out of the ICUs faster than the men who did not get progesterone. So fascinating. Super, super interesting. Like, if that's not a cool signal, I don't know what is. And it was not a bad study, guys. Like, it was a pretty darn good study that was done. So again, it's hogwash. Like, we produce hormones as men too, and we produce progesterone, and it might not be as much as testosterone. And I'm not saying every guy needs a bunch of progesterone all the time, but Dr. Thierry Hertoff, another great mentor of mine. In fact, I have his book somewhere back here on one of my shelves behind me if you're watching. He was another guy who totally saw this as like, hey, this is a really, really, really good medication, a really good hormone that we should be using for our male patients, not just for our female patients. There's some really cool stuff that can happen when we give men progesterone. Not all, but some. And the more I utilize it for my male patients, especially my elderly male patients who don't sleep that well and who do just, most of us guys, we're going to get a little bit of BPH, which, by the way, is largely influenced, and we're seeing this in the studies, by two things: estrogens, probably some xenoestrogens too, and endotoxin, bacteria. Not literally bacteria, but the byproducts of bacteria, that lipopolysaccharides. We're seeing that cause a lot of inflammation at the prostate over time. And so again, progesterone has this really great effect because it's going to lower the amount of estrogen there. It's going to compete with dihydrotestosterone, which is, by the way, not a bad guy, not going to cause you to have prostate cancer necessarily. But DHT does also increase the growth and the size to some degree of the prostate. It's a part of that. Progesterone competes with dihydrotestosterone. So I love progesterone because, again, we see it as a hormone that I just don't think, much like Ray Peat, God love him, God rest his soul, I don't think progesterone has gotten the attention that it deserves. And honestly, if I can go on another little rant here, I think a lot of that is because, number one, there was this assumption, especially in men, that they just don't need progesterone. They don't have a uterus. It's just this random hormone that women make lots of, but men, they just don't need it at all. And it was the same with women. Well, it's just a uterus hormone. Once a woman is old and her uterus isn't useful, or God forbid we get rid of her uterus via hysterectomy, they don't need progesterone. Maybe they need it if they have a uterus, if they're going to have some estrogen, just so that we protect them from, God forbid, a little bit of growth down there, but that's it. And that's so crazy because progesterone is literally a pro-metabolic hormone. It interfaces with our mitochondria, the things that produce our energy within our bodies. It interfaces directly with that. So you're telling me this hormone that is involved with the production of energy, which is the currency of life, women don't need that anymore after a certain age? What about the fact that we have progesterone receptors freaking head to toe, basically, in our heart, in our brain? You're telling me that doesn't matter either? I'm confused. What about for men? So we produce some progesterone, but it's just like this random byproduct thing and it's useless? No way. We have the same receptors all over too, by the way. We might not have a uterus, but guess what? We still produce progesterone and we still need it. And in fact, there are novel situations, like maybe in the ICU when you have COVID, or maybe when you have BPH and you're not sleeping very well, and you maybe just aren't producing any more progesterone because you're old and your freaking cells don't produce as much of it. Maybe you need some. Those are just a couple things, but I think the bigger thing that caused us to say F off to progesterone was progestins. The WHI, Women's Health Initiative, which was done, how long was that? 20 years ago or 10 years ago now? They used non-identical hormones. For those of you who don't know this is really worth looking into. Again, I could do another whole podcast on this. Maybe I will. But the WHI used conjugated equine estrogen and progestins. Both of those are non-identical hormones. They are synthetic, but again, please don't equate synthetic with bad. Bioidentical hormones are technically synthetic too. The problem with the non-identical hormones is they don't act and respond the same way our bioidentical hormones do. When you give women progestins, especially in bigger doses, it literally causes every problem that you can think of. Clots, strokes, heart attacks. It can destroy your brain, lead to Alzheimer's and dementia. It just ravages your body. It's not good for people to take. It's a known carcinogen. And so they said, well, we can't use progestin anymore, but the problem is, and I go over this in the course because it's so necessary for people to know this, and it's worth repeating 1,000 times. Researchers, medical providers literally use the word progesterone when they're talking about progestins. How confusing is that? They're not the same thing. This is the problem, is in for some reason in academia, they are treated as equals and they are not. I mean, in my opinion, it's like table salt and road salt. They are not the same thing at all. Just because they might have a little bit of sodium in them. One is sodium chloride, the other is God knows what. I don't even know what road salt's made out of, but you don't want to put it on your French fries, okay? It's probably not good for you. That is progestin and progesterone. And unfortunately, they equated the two. And in much of the research studies, there have actually been studies done talking about how researchers wrongly use the word progesterone when they're talking about progestin. And so they've said, hey, you should really start trying to use the word progesterone when you're talking about bioidentical hormones only, or the acronym P4, which is like a scientific breakdown of progesterone as a molecule. Needless to say, that squashed progesterone. It totally destroyed it. And yet we still use progestin in freaking birth control and all these things, which are also super detrimental to the health and livelihood and long-term outcomes of females. I will do a podcast on that sometime. I'm not going to get into that yet. By the way, I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. The HRT University Master Course, we go over all these in much greater detail. It's awesome because you guys need to know this. But again, I think that unfortunately, the way the cookie crumbled, and I'm not necessarily trying to blame somebody. I don't think there's like some necessarily evil cabal that's like trying to keep progesterone out of the limelight. I think it's just the way the cookie actually did crumble. There's not much incentive to provide bioidentical progesterone. Number one, from a cost perspective, it's much more expensive to produce that than it is progestin. You can't patent bioidentical hormones, just like you can't patent vitamin C. It's just a natural occurring thing in the universe. So can you make any money? If you're Pfizer or Eli Lilly or one of those companies, can you make any money, really significant money, if you don't patent a hormone so your competitors can't make it, and you can make it for pennies on the dollar and sell it for, a freaking Ferrari's worth? Like, that's just what you're going to do as a company with shareholders. And that's what has been done. I don't agree with that, but that's just the way, again, things kind of shook out. If you're a provider, now all of a sudden for the past several decades, all you've been told is that, progestin, good, only birth control, never ever for women, otherwise no progesterone ever, right? Like it's just baked into it's like this, like we just got it baked into the whole system. It's not being taught in universities. It's not being, really thoroughly investigated enough, in my humble opinion, in the literature. And so we're at this kind of weird standstill if you're looking at it from a conventional lens. But from a non-conventional lens, if you're Dr. Ray Peat, you're looking at this like, what are you doing? What are we thinking? Like, it's so obvious. The WHI told us, like, don't use progestin. And fortunately, the Europeans were smart enough to figure this out. I'll give some credit there. They were really, it appears like, at least when I'm looking through the literature, the ones who said, oh, okay, we get it. WHI, non-identical hormones. What about bioidenticals? And some of the first really good literature, I think, coming out, randomized control trials, especially coming out about bioidenticals, were coming from Europe, Denmark, I think, in particular, and France, and proving that bioidenticals were so superior, so safe. And it was kind of like of course, no brainer. But to not belabor the point, what I do feel strongly about is that we as providers, as educators, for both clinicians, so peer-to-peer and peer-to-peer, provider to patient, we have to start helping people understand this stuff. And it's complicated. I mean, think about this. I've just recorded, how long am I? I mean, where am I? I'm 53 minutes into a podcast, okay? And I'm trying to get this point across to you, likely a provider who at least kind of understands some of the jargon and the history of this stuff maybe. But to a poor patient, my gosh, this is just mind-numbingly crazy, right? And so I want you to feel like you're a part of this movement. I think a lot of us just view ourselves as like, oh, I'm just this like, really, really, really little fish in this great big pond. You might feel that way, but you're not. If you own a clinic, if you're seeing patients, I don't even care if you own a clinic. If you're seeing patients, if you're interfacing with what is our community locally, or maybe even telehealth, whatever, you are not as small as you think. You are much bigger. There's not a lot of us communicating this stuff. I mean, seriously, there's not. You are, I compare us to like, Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea, and we're moving across the, United States over to the West Coast, and like, God knows what's over there. Who knows? We are frontiersmen and women. Like we are in a, you've maybe heard it, right? Like wellness medicine, HRT, aesthetics, like it's like the Wild West. It really is. It really is. And as I know that oftentimes comes off as like scary and unnerving, but also like really exciting. We are the people who have said enough of this. There's something better on the other side. I'm getting signal, and it's way more than signal. I'm getting proof, right? God doesn't need to prove himself, but humans do, and we need trials and studies to prove that stuff, right? Or pictures or evidence. We have it. It's been around for decades. So now we get to stand firm and say, hey, I don't mind if people get upset or attack me or make me feel like I'm a quack or something for treating people with hormone replacement therapy, but the people are asking. Our patients are. They're getting gaslit by their providers. I don't care who they are, NPs, PAs, MDs, doesn't matter. They're getting gaslit by their providers. They don't know any better. A lot of them aren't willing to learn. Not right now. Someday they will, but not right now. But we are. That's why you're here. That's you somehow, whoever you are listening to this podcast, that's why we're here. There is something guiding you. I don't know if you're religious or not, but I think God is guiding you to a point in your life in which you're saying, this doesn't make any sense and I'm tired of it. And I want to do what's right. I want to do what's best for my community. And by default, that means I'm going to do what's right by me and my family. And I'm going to be able to put my head down on my pillow and actually get a good night's sleep kind of thing, right? So I want you to embrace that. And I know that might feel a little weird at first, like, oh, I'm like this pioneer and I'm with Nico and all, we're in this movement together of trying to grow this community, this HRT university thing. And what does that mean? It means that we get to call the shots now. We're not as small as we think we are. Our words and our actions matter, and they have a really strong ripple effect. We are changing history. We are altering that whole fabric. We're ironing out the wrinkles. You and me, okay? You and I should protect my grammar. I want you to feel part of that with me because I love you and I love that you're here. And I hope that you're super interested and invested in yourself and in your knowledge and in what you're learning and in what you're speaking and telling to your patients. And I hope you just have that pride, literally. I mean, I hope you feel proud in the fact that you're doing something that maybe feels a little bit daunting, but at the same time is something that's going to feel so rewarding once you kind of wrap your head around hormone replacement therapy and how to provide it and do a great job for your community. So if you guys have questions about progesterone, never, ever, ever feel free to ask me because I love talking about progesterone. It's my favorite. If you guys want to learn more about progesterone, freaking take the HRT University Master Course. It's insane. It's so good. If you love this deep dive type of stuff that I just talked about for like an hour, I talk about it in there for a lot longer. Okay. And it's great. It's super practical too. Like, I want to give you the steps you need to be successful here and feel really confident on the back end. Okay. So check out the HRT University Mass Course. It's in the link below. If you go to my website, hrtuniversity.com, you'll find it there. Don't forget, I write a daily email Monday through Friday. Me, not ChatGPT. Nico Misleh writes a daily email just for you. Education, business stuff, no BS ever. No fluff. I just want to give you real education that you can actually use. I mean, I cite studies, all kinds of stuff in there. It's great. It's all free. And we have a free Facebook group, Nico's HRT University. These are all linked below. Join it. Come on in. Hang out. I love that we're in this together. The more of us, the better, right? And I want us to feel like we're a part of something much bigger than just us. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day, and join me again for the next episode. Take care.